DreAllDay.com.
You're now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into one bundle, one package, one framework, one mindset, one philosophy, one approach, one daily masterclass. Yes, the show comes out every day. Nobody told you? It is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is championships are won on the plane and on the bus. Now, what exactly does this mean? Well, you're going to understand that by the time we get through this masterclass. Now, before I even, this is a sports reference, by the way. It's a sports reference, but it applies to every one of you, no matter what kind of line of work you're in, what it is that you're doing. Now, before I get into explaining more of it, let me tell you that I have a text line where I want you to text me and tell me the best insight that you gleaned from today's masterclass. My number is 305-384-6894. You can send a text right now or anytime during this episode and let me know, or even later on today or tomorrow when you had a chance to marinate and think about this one or any other masterclass you listen to here on this show. If you have a question, comment, concern, criticism, challenge, follow-up statement that you want to make about anything that I've said here today, you can just text me about it. Also, if you just want to get my daily motivation text, because you're going to get it once you join my texting community either way. If you just want to get the daily motivation text, you don't have anything specific to say about this one, just text and say hello right now to that number, and you will get my daily motivation text sent to you every morning. Again, the number 305-384-6894. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this one here today is actually because I was talking to a business colleague of mine, and they had some challenges going on within their group in business. And it made me think of this right here and something I heard Isaiah Thomas say. Now, those of you who don't know who Isaiah is a NBA Hall of Famer. And this is Isaiah Thomas, who played back in the 80s and 90s for the Detroit Pistons. And he won a couple of championships. He was a relatively small guy by basketball standards, about 6 feet, 6'1". And Isaiah he played at the University of Indiana, then played for the Detroit Pistons his entire career. Won a couple championships. He was the last guy to really beat Michael Jordan before Michael Jordan started beating everybody back in the late 80s and going into the early 90s. And one of the things that Isaiah mentioned once was when he was talking to, I believe he was talking to Bill Simmons, or maybe he said it in Bill Simmons, who's one of my favorite sports writers. He barely writes anymore, but when he used to write, he talked about Isaiah and this thing that he called the secret. And the secret was, what is the secret to a team winning championships in sports? And the secret to a team winning championships in sports is not what most people think, which is have the best players and have the most talent. Now, having great players and talent does matter, but usually at the professional level, every team has good players and talent. So if everybody has good players and talent, who wins amongst them? The answer is what they call the secret. And the secret is really about the selflessness of a team. Since everybody on that team has talent and everybody on the team has game, and at the professional level, everybody on the team has been the man somewhere in their career up to that point. But at the same time, you understand there's no team in life where everybody can be the man. Now, a family, that can't work. It can't work in business. It can't work in a partnership even, and it can't work in sports. Everybody can't be the guy or the girl on a team and that team be successful. They can be okay, but they're not going to be successful over everybody else if everyone's trying to be the main person all at the same time. It has to be a priority, and it has to be a pecking order. And one of the things about the secret is understanding that some people are going to most of the people actually on a team are going to have to be selfless. I mean, they're going to have to sacrifice some of themselves for the betterment of the team so that all the pieces can work together. Usually when we talk about sports, usually there's one or two people on every sports team that is the main person, and everybody else is playing a role. Even being the main person is a role in itself, but the main person pretty much gets to show all of their bag of skills, whereas everybody else, they may only get to use a portion of their bag of skills, but they're doing it for the greater good of the success of the team. And that's really the secret to team success, because everybody has some game, but everybody can't do the same things. And any of you watched the basketball game before, you understand, even if you don't understand the game that well, you understand the general concept that there's only one ball, right? That everybody can't score at the same time. So next time you watch a basketball game, understand that all 5 guys on the court or girls on the court may be able to score, but there's only one ball. So everybody can't score at the same time. And everybody's not going to get equal opportunity to score because that's not the way that the team works. And this whole concept of championships being won on a plane and bus, it connects to this whole concept of selflessness and people sacrificing for the greater of the team this way. In that, when the camaraderie that the players build with each other away from work, off the court, when they're not actually doing their job, that camaraderie and that togetherness that they can create away from work, it bleeds into what they do during work. In other words, teams, they say that, I've heard this said many times, and maybe some of you even believe it, that people who work together need not be best friends away from work. They don't have to be best friends outside of the office, don't have to be best friends on the court, as long as everybody can come together and do their job when it's time to actually do the work. And there are some examples of this actually being true, at least from what we've heard, and those teams still being successful. One example would be maybe Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls, where most of the Bulls players, actually every Bull player who was talked about during that Last Dance documentary, which came out about a year and a half ago, I'm sure many of you have watched it, none of them said they were Michael Jordan's friend. They said Michael Jordan was like a coworker. He wasn't really around off the court. He couldn't go to the places that we went. He didn't go to the movies with us or go to restaurants with us because he was such a big star. He couldn't go anywhere because he drew such a crowd. He was like a fish in a fishbowl. So he wasn't really friends with his teammates on the Chicago Bulls. They all have said that. But at the same time, that team was very successful. I would consider to be an exception to the rule. The rule is when there's camaraderie away from work, there's usually camaraderie in work. And if there is no camaraderie away from work, usually that camaraderie falls apart during work. Another example that would be an exception, I would say, would be maybe Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal with the LA Lakers, where Kobe was a guy who, even though he was not the main guy, he was the second guy to Shaquille O'Neal, he was kind of away from the rest of the team by all accounts, even Kobe himself. He was kind of away from the rest of the team. He didn't really have that camaraderie with everyone else the way that the rest of the team had camaraderie with each other. So, and that was a little bit different because, again, Kobe was not the main guy. He was the guy next to the main guy, but that team was also very successful. Those are 2 very successful exceptions that I'm giving you, but one of the reasons why they were able to be successful while being exceptions is because they were super duper talented people. These are people who are maybe 2 of the top 10 basketball players of all time that I'm talking about here. So all the rest of us, other 99.9% of us, unless you're one of the top 10 ever in terms of talent and performance at what you do, you probably are not going to be an exception. Okay, so even though those exceptions are well-known exceptions and highly successful exceptions, understand they are indeed exceptions. All right, so all that being said, what am I actually talking about here today? It's about the camaraderie that is within your team, within your organization, within your group, and how that camaraderie, I mean the people-to-people camaraderie, not the work camaraderie, but the people-to-people rapport that the individuals within your group have, that does play a role in whether your team is going to be successful or not. And what Isaiah Thomas said, the reason I referenced him at the beginning, is that Isaiah talked about how the way those Detroit Pistons team won championships was not because of what they did on the court. Of course, they got recognized on the court and did their thing, and everybody knows about it, and we can watch the film. It was on the plane rides and the bus rides when the rapport was built between the men on that team that they became a cohesive group. So then when that unit got on the basketball court to play, because they all had that rapport off the court, they were able to have a much stronger connection on the court, and it was much easier for everyone to be willing to sacrifice for the guy to their left and the guy to their right because they had a rapport with that guy off the court. Now, if I didn't like you, the guy to my left, and I hate the guy to my right, am I going to sacrifice as much for you? Am I going to go as hard for you? Probably not. So that's what I'm talking about here today. So let's get into our points so you can understand even better what I mean. The topic, once again, championships are won on the plane and on the bus. Point number 1. Some people say, and I touched on this in the introduction here, that the people within an organization or within a team do not need to like each other in order for that team to win. I will counter and say, yes, they do. For the team to win the championship, they need to like each other. There needs to be a very strong connection between everybody on that team away from work in order for them to have a great connection and do the best that they can do at work. When people hate or dislike each other and they're on the same team and then producing good work still, all right, that's an exception to the rule. When people have no connection to the person that they're working with and still win, that's an exception to the rule. Again, Kobe, Shaq, Lakers, Michael Jordan, the Bulls, those are exceptions. Again, those are two teams that we all know about. But again, think of the other 10 million basketball teams that have existed, professional and amateur worldwide. When else do you know about that happening? It ain't happening that often. Most human beings cannot work smoothly through that level of discontent, especially if there's dislike. Now, when there's just nothing, it's not dislike, but it's just not anything there, that's a little bit more workable. But when there's dislike, that's pretty hard to do. Understand that it's the informal situations between people that make teams really win. It's not the formal times when, all right, we need to sit down, we need to work on this, then we're gonna do this, then we're gonna do that. Those are the formal times. It's the informal times when, all right, we don't have anything planned right now, but we're all just hanging out, having drinks. We're just hanging out, talking. We're just having useless banter. We're small talking. Those are the situations that really build connections between people. Those are the situations that build relationships. That strengthen or destroy the bonds between humans. And if there are no bonds, maybe because of unrest between people, or there's just, there's just nothing there. There's indifference between people. You probably cannot overcome that with just talent, and thusly you're not going to win. You can be good, but you're not going to win. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is championships are won on a plane and on a bus. As an example, and I talked about this in the intro, in sports, off the court or off the field, in business, and this is not just with the people who are dealing with each other on the team, but also, let's say in business, for example, as a metaphor for what I'm talking about here, when you have a customer service issue, there's an issue between your customers calling up and somebody on your team in the business is taking that call or responding to that email or doing it back and forth. When you have that challenge, or there's some argument, or there's some discrepancy between what your client customer says and what you have going on, those situations are where you can either lose that customer forever or you can make them a lifelong advocate. Is this true or not? Any of you who is in business, especially those of you who are in business like retail, where there are many transactions and they're happening quickly and in volume every single day, the better you handle those challenging transactions, those determine whether that customer will never come back to you ever again, or if they're going to be a lifelong customer based on the way you handle the challenges. Not the way you handle the good stuff, the way you handle the challenges. Some people say things like, and now stepping away from that example, but some people say things like, I don't like small talking. You know, any of you type of person, you don't really like small talking, you're standing next to somebody waiting for the elevator, or you're in the elevator and somebody brings up the weather, or they bring up the sports team in a local town, and you don't really like small talking because you know it's not really going anywhere. Understand that there is an argument out there, and the belief by many, and I actually agree with this belief, that small talk, you know, that informal banter where people are talking really kind of about nothing but just talking, that small talk is like glue to relationship building. That small talk allows you to build relationships with another person because they notice that you can talk about nothing. You have the ability to talk about nothing. You can, make a little joke about the person's little dog who's barking at everybody who just walked by, the two of you standing there. Instead of that awkward silence, that pregnant pause, you two can actually engage with each other and chuckle and laugh for 30 seconds before you go your way and they go their way. That is the glue that actually helps build relationships. And I've seen this. And one way that I've seen it is because for the last 15 years, I've always lived in buildings that have elevators. And I like living on higher floors in these buildings. So I'm always in elevators and I'm seeing the same people over and over and over again. And sometimes they'll speak to me the first time they see me. Sometimes they got to warm up and kind of get used to maybe seeing somebody like me, and they get comfortable and they start talking to me. And those little 30-second conversations that happen in the elevator allow me to warm up to them, for them to warm up to me, and it actually builds relationships. And it's actually, in many ways, I've seen it tangibly produce positive outcomes for me, simply because of the small talk. I don't really know these people. I don't know anything about them. I don't know if they have kids. I don't know their girlfriends. I don't know anything about them. But I know I see them in the elevator all the time. They see me in the elevator all the time. And because we can small talk, these informal situations, it builds a little bit of a relationship, and that glue leads to other things in the future. And again, those small things can lead to big things. So your ability to small talk, for those of you who don't like small talking, listen, small talk is the bridge to big talk. All right, you like big talking, you like talking about big things, you might have to small talk a little bit just to get into it. For any of you who is from outside of the United States, and this is something that, again, any of you who is from outside USA, you can confirm this or tell me that I'm wrong, but I know this to be true, is that here in America, when we're sitting down with someone and we're planning to talk business, or we get on the phone with somebody and we're talking business, usually we just go straight into it, right? We get together, we shake hands, say, what's up, how you doing? Within 30 seconds, we're already talking about the business, whatever the business is that we're talking about, the money we're gonna exchange, the product I'm trying to sell you, whatever it is that we're doing. But in other countries, many other countries, almost everywhere except the United States, before you even get to talking about business, you spend the first 20 minutes of the conversation talking about everything other than business. We talk about the weather, talk about your families, we talk about anything other than the main business that we're actually meeting to do. We understand that the beginning part of that conversation, we're not talking about that at all. And if you try to jump straight into it, Americans, with someone who's not from this culture, they're gonna take that as a sign of rudeness. It's like you have no people skills. You're not able to small talk, therefore they're not willing to do the big talk with you. And again, any of you who is either from outside of USA or you have dealt with people who are from outside of USA in terms of business, please confirm or deny this with me and let me know if that's right. And I know it to be true, but somebody can co-sign it so that I know it's not just me. Point number 3, today's topic once again is championships are won on a plane and on a bus. Understand that the informal, unplanned, and sometimes unpleasant situations, these are a form of what we call impromptu conversation, impromptu communication. And this is something that I learned about, as a matter of fact, when I was a president of the South Beach branch of Toastmasters back in, this was 2014 going into 2015. Now, Toastmasters, for those who don't know, is a volunteer organization where people meet on a regular basis to practice communication. Communication being both speaking and listening. Now, in Toastmasters, we would have this segment of every meeting that we call the table topics, or impromptu speaking. People may give it different titles. But the way that it worked was very simple. Someone who was at the front of the room, standing on the stage, they would bring up a topic or they would ask a question about anything, and then they would call on someone who was in the room. Anyone in the room, they could call on anybody they wanted at random, and that person who got called on would come up to the stage and they would need to speak about that topic or the question that was asked for about 1 to 2 minutes. That's it. 1 to 2 minutes to talk about it. So if I said something like, I heard that they're not going to have any fans at the Tokyo Olympics this year because of the COVID scare that they're having throughout the country of Tokyo. How would you feel as an athlete about to go play in the Olympics, but there will be no fans whatsoever in the stands while you're performing your sport? How would you feel about that? Now just call on you randomly out of the audience, and now you have 1 to 2 minutes to talk about that. Now, you weren't planning on being asked a question. You had no idea what the question was going to be. You weren't even planning on being on the stage. But now here you are, and you got 1 to 2 minutes to talk about it. That is the small talk. And the more comfortable you can get with situations like that, just going off the cuff and dealing with a situation as it is in the moment and being comfortable with it, that is the glue that builds relationships. That's the glue that makes people comfortable with you. Even someone who you've never spoken to before, when they see the way that you deal with that, they'll be more comfortable talking to you. It might be something that you said. It might be the way that you said it. It might be the way that you just confidently handled the situation makes them more comfortable to say something now, because maybe they wanted to say something to you, but they weren't sure they could approach you. But now that they heard it, now they feel more comfortable doing it. So this sounds easy, right? Sometimes it's easy until people need to get up there and they need to actually go do it. Because again, I was the president of the club, so I would see this, and some people would get very nervous when they got up there, whereas other people, they were more smooth with it. They were more natural, and usually the difference between the two was just how much experience did that person have dealing with off-the-cuff situations. And this is really what we're talking about here today, is these off-the-cuff situations. Those of you who are in business, again, you don't plan for any of your clients or customers having a problem with a product or service that they bought from you. But when that does happen, and it will happen, the more sales you do, the more often it's going to come up. Those off-the-cuff situations are where you can make or break that relationship with that person. Impromptu engagements build the character of a group as well as they build the character of the individual person. All that said, recapping today's class, which is championships are won on a plane and on a bus. Again, this is a sports reference that is really about the camaraderie that is built between players on a team, and because of that camaraderie, the players are willing to sacrifice for each other. Even though they all are good enough to not need to sacrifice, they're willing to sacrifice because of the rapport they build with each other away from work. And I believe this is also true in business, is also true in families, and is true in life. Point number one, some people say that the people within an organization or a team don't need to like each other in order to win. I say yes, they do. In order to win a championship, they do need to like each other. People hating or disliking each other or being indifferent towards one another and producing good work, the times that you know about it, those are exceptions to the rule. And there are many other rules than there are many more rules than there are exceptions. Most humans cannot work smoothly through discontent with other people that they're supposed to be working with. Those informal situations are what make teams win because they build relationships and they build bonds. Point number two, in sports, for example, off the court or off the field, in business, when a customer service issue comes up, these are things that maybe you're not planning, you weren't planning on having anything to do in these moments or even to have to deal with these moments, but that is the glue. That small talk is the glue that leads to the big talk. Point number three, informal and unplanned situations are a form of impromptu speaking, something that I learned when I was in Toastmasters. Every meeting would have these table topic sessions where we would just call on someone to speak on a topic for 1 to 2 minutes, impromptu. They had no idea what the topic would be or that they would be the one speaking on it. And the better you get at that, the more smooth you are at that, the more doors it opens for you to have communications with other people on other subjects because they see how comfortable you were, which makes them more comfortable. It's actually an icebreaker for you and an icebreaker for relationships. So if you didn't know that, now you know. Send me a text, tell me the best insight you got from today's masterclass. My number is 305-384-6894. Work on your game. Dre all day.